So as you guys might know, Aaron Judge, who has had a record-setting season so far this year for the New York Yankees, he was previously a tight end recruit, and we got a guy who's got a very similar build to Aaron Judge when he was in high school. And that first guy, who far and away is one of the most talented guys I've seen as a high school recruit playing the tight end position specifically. I'm referring to Duce Robinson, and he's the guy that I was referring to earlier that has this big recruitment for him to also play baseball. Now, it sounds like he has decided that he is focusing on football. Currently, the number one tight end per 247 Sports from Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, Arizona. Another Arizona kid, which is interesting to see. 6'6", 225 pounds. He is not committed, however. He's projected to go to USC, which, seeing how they're throwing the football right now, probably wouldn't be a surprise if he ends up deciding to go to USC. Now, the things that you see with him, and we're talking about that sport athleticism that pops up on tape, I think far and away from any of the guys that we watched today, really easy accelerator. The big thing, and I know that we're going to talk a ton about this, not a lot of blocking film that you saw in these highlights, but it doesn't matter because he looks and plays like a receiver at the tight end position. He's got plenty of room to add weight to his frame. But the really interesting thing about him is the deep threat value that he provides to his current offense and that he can provide to his offense at USC, which we don't always see with tight ends. So, Matt, kicking on over to you first, what are some of the things that you noticed with Robinson that really excited you?
Well, I feel like you were just reading my notes right there, like verbatim, because really the first word was wow when I watched the film. I just can't get over, just how good he looks on film, his frame. He's 6'6" listed. I mean, on the film, it looks like he's like 7 feet tall. But just his speed, his strength, like you said, moves like a receiver. And really just the tracking of the football was top notch. I mean, I even wrote in my notes too that like if he was in the receiver class that we did just a few episodes ago, I'd almost rank him as one of the top receivers in that class. I think so far in the early stages of us doing this show, he might be the best football player that I've seen on film on the offensive side of the ball so far.
It's funny, Joe, because tight end, I feel like is a position from high school to college that can be, you have to project a lot, right? Because these guys are, I mean, Duce is 6'6", 220 something pounds. And like you said, you don't see him block on film, at least the highlight tape that he puts out there. But Matt, what you kind of hit on, I think is perfect, right? Like this kid plays in the boundary, plays in the field. They'll play him at Wildcat quarterback. They threw him a double pass to let him throw the football. Like he's the best.
He threw it pretty well too. Yeah,
he did. Yeah, it wasn't a bad toss at all, man. And I guess that baseball background kind of kicks in there a little bit, but he's just a player that is the best player on the field for Pinnacle, best player on the field just in general with whatever team he's playing against, right? So 6'6". A lot of times guys might be listed a little bigger than they actually are. He looks a legit 6'6" with vines for arms, incredible length, athleticism, wins above the rim, and he can run the seam, man. Like he is just that type of dude. So, I mean, Joe, like this is one of those kids where, yes, does he need to gain weight? For sure. All of these kids do though, no, right? Because that's just kind of what we're working with. But this kid's the real deal. It's kind of hard to poke holes in his game because it just seems like he can do a little bit of everything. And he's got a frame where I think he could be 255, 260 pretty easily. Like, I don't think it's going to be very hard for him.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing really for him going forward is just making sure that he keeps the speed that he has that to me is kind of game changing. We saw a lot of tight end screens or receiver screens to him in his highlight film, and the acceleration, past a lot of defenders. It's not like he's just beating them or, breaking shoelace tackles. He is completely separating from them on film. And, that's something that will be important for him too, is just as he continues to mature and get stronger and bigger in that college weight room to keep that speed up. But you can see where just matchup wise, like you alluded to, Ryan, just, put him in the slot and line him up against a linebacker. He's going to win a lot of those opportunities. Put him up against a safety who's maybe undersized. He's going to a lot of those 50-50 footballs too. And then, you talk about just matchups against corners too. Even against the lengthy corner, like a Jalen Ramsey type of length corner, you could still see where like you wouldn't be totally afraid of him being in that situation because he has that length as well, along with the ball tracking skills and just the physicality too. I mean, it probably took 4 or 5 minutes into the highlight before he actually was tackled in the highlight. So that's always impressive when you're, tackled for the first time in the 5th minute of your highlight film.
And the one thing too and I brought this up when I was doing my intro on him, that's really intriguing is that, like, a lot of times in college and especially in high school, because you don't have quarterbacks who necessarily have the arm to stretch the field, tight ends aren't really asked to run as many deep routes as you saw him running in his highlight tape. And he was just constantly hitting all these seam routes, all these really deep route concepts. Matt, from like your perspective, having a tight end that can do that, like how game breaking is that? Because there's really not a lot of guys in college. There's even fewer guys in the NFL that are capable. Like you think of the Darren Wallers, like Travis Kelce has been somebody who's utilized in that manner. But like, what impact does that have for a college quarterback having a tight end that can be a deep threat?
Well, I think really the main impact is that it gives the play caller, the offensive coordinator, your offensive strategy, just so many ways to be more explosive. We saw, obviously what USC is doing with just the skill set and the players that they're getting to that program. Now you can line up Robinson on the outside. And if it's man coverage, you're going to have a linebacker that leaves the box that goes out there and covers a man one-on-one. One, it's easy for the quarterback to identify what the coverage is. Two, it's like you have a great matchup in, a fantastic athlete versus a linebacker that's not usually comfortable in space. So there's multiple ways going forward where they can be, extremely explosive offensively by putting him in perfect situations that allow him, one, for the quarterback to understand what the coverage is because of his alignment. Two, because just creating more matchups and issues on the field. And that's where going forward, it's pretty exciting, for the Trojans for sure.
And I think that he can create those explosives in multiple ways too, which is exciting, right? Like we saw on the tape after catchability, we saw just flat out just foot quickness and explosiveness down the field. And then we also saw the fact of like, hey, he can extend and track the football down the field too. So creating explosives, I mean, Matt, like I think that if you're an offensive coordinator working with Duce Robinson, you can maximize him in so many different ways, which makes it exciting because you don't have to just pigeonhole him into, hey, this is a vertical kid in one area. He can create vertical and explosive plays in multiple ways, which is really, truly exciting as an offensive coordinator as well.
And I mean, think too, like we discussed last week about Zachariah Branch, right? And his ability in space to create things. Imagine if you have Duce Robinson and Zachariah Branch on the field at the exact same time. You can run a screen to Zachariah with Duce blocking a corner, which is a good opportunity for him because he's going to be bigger than most corners that he blocks. But then it's like you have the double move off of that, where it's like you fake that screen to Zachariah and then you throw it over the top to Duce, who, stutters and run by the corner now with speed and then runs it for a touchdown. So that's where, again, just like when you put multiple playmakers on the field, it just becomes a huge headache for anybody to stop them defensively. And man, his skill set is like, it's ridiculous. I was really impressed, and like I said, I think he's the best player we've seen offensively so far.
I know we've established that we don't like to force comps here, but this isn't a one-to-one, Ryan.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-to-one comp, but like in terms of deep threat ability, looks like and plays like a receiver, Ryan, you probably already get a sense of where I'm about to go with this. He feels like Kyle Pitts in a way. Like he feels like he could be Kyle Pitts for USC if that ends up being where he commits to play. Ryan, any thoughts on that? Am I forcing a little similar frame? It's the frame's not that far off and the speed's not that far off either. Like this is probably going to be a 4.5 kid once he's done filling in his frame. Again, I just think the reason why I came up with that is that like deep threat at Florida, deep threat now possibly for USC and in high school. What do you think about that?
I don't hate it, Joe. I really don't, because it's something, and that's a positive for me, right? I'm saying I don't hate it.
I know you don't hate it. Means I approve.
It's a good job. It's a good job. You get the stamp on that one, but it really is, man. Like the thing that, and it gives you kind of pause to compare someone to a Kyle Pitts because he was used as a unicorn for good reason, right? But how this kid is used at Pinnacle is similar to a Kyle Pitts, right? Like you saw him in every area of the field be able to be a playmaker, to be able to be a separator, to be able to make big plays. So I don't hate it at all, Joe. And I'll say this, if USC does land this kid, we have seen Lincoln Riley and that Oklahoma stretch of offense with guys like Jermaine Gresham and Mark Andrews utilize tight ends and to be able to use that seam runner and that big athletic kid down the middle of the field. And it would be a very good match, I think, with USC if they're able to get Duce, but obviously we'll see what his final decision is here moving forward.
Now, the one thing that I just want to throw in there before we transition, because he's uncommitted, and even committed guys can change their mind at any point, but because he's uncommitted, albeit 100% projection by 247 Sports to go to USC. The other schools that are really close on USC's tail for him, Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. What are your guys' thoughts? And Matt, I want to head to you first. Do we think USC is the best opportunity for him, or is maybe another one of those three programs a better situation for him to head to?
Honestly, with all those programs, I'm curious to see what you think, Ryan, but I think they're kind of all home runs for him. I really do. I think they're programs that understand how to utilize athletes the way that he is. I would say that, maybe USC potentially is the safer of the group, just because of the fact that new coaching staff, the allegiance to the team that's already there isn't quite as like in stone. And they're looking for that first generation of like their guys to kind of take over and become, what they see the Trojans to be in the future. And I think for him, a lot of it too has to do with just, does he like the quarterbacks and that kind of situation too, that he potentially is going to school with, the guys that are going to get him the football. I think those are important factors going forward, but I don't think he can really miss with any of those options going forward.
No, I think they're all great fits, to your point, right, Matt? Like I talked about the USC fit because I just think that Lincoln Riley has shown that he can use a tight end in his offense, kind of that bigger body player down the middle of the field. And I mean, he even uses them all over the formation a little bit. We've seen what Georgia's been doing now the last couple of years with Brock Bowers and Washington at tight ends. And, Eric Gilbert's kind of nowhere to be found at the moment, but Georgia's shown their ability to use the tight end there. And then Alabama, Joe, I mean, we talked about Cameron Latu in the preseason. You remember what O.J. Howard was able to do at Alabama. You remember what Irv Smith Jr. was able to do at Alabama. So all of these three schools have shown the ability, or these three coaching staffs, I should say, have shown the ability to highlight the tight end position. So I really think whether it ends up being one of those three teams or not, it's hard to find a bad fit for Duce Robinson. His talent is just at that high of a level, in my opinion.
And on top of that, too, Steve Sarkisian, who was once the offensive coordinator at Alabama that ignited the performances of multiple talented tight ends, is now at Texas, and that's one of the other schools on his tail. So I agree with both of you guys. It's not like a wrong decision there. It's not like we've got one team on here that's running the wishbone where he's never going to touch the football and he's being asked to block. He's instead going to be in situations where he's just going to be a playmaker. He's going to be a dude, and he's going to put up a lot of points, a lot of yards for whatever team he picks. And it sounds like it's going to be USC.